I'm the only one on the video. Okay, so what I've handed out here is sort of a informational sheet, and these are all nabbed from some other source, just for your information. And what I want to point out, though, in this is there was a typo. If you'll kind of look at that second to the last page where you see this, and it says theta brainwaves, you can just switch that to 4 to 8, not 7 to 13, because 7 to 13 is the alpha brainwave state, and they might have been pasting and copying, and I know how that can happen, and they did not adjust the numbers there. So, you know, I'm appreciative somebody else wrote all this stuff up and I could just nab it instead of me writing it. So I'm not going to read through this, but my talk will go over a lot of this. And I want to start with, first I had mentioned, okay, so for those of you that were here for the writing workshop, you kind of had an example of what hypnosis is, and I did talk a little bit about the brainwave state. So I'm going to start, though, with what I found Theosophy had to say, Madame Blavatsky or Judge or Sinnott, and not to a very large degree because it's very complicated, but and throw in questions as I go if you like, because I know that it's going to all tie in. But they were writing their opinions in the late 1800s, early 1900s, right? So if you think back to that time and that era, there was a lot more, maybe, even though they understood it better, spooky association with mesmerism or that sort of thing. So Dr. Mesmer was, what I found from reading and listening to stuff on their writings was what they seemed to incorporate hypnotism, mesmerism into one big group that also what currently includes energy healing or energetic vampirism. Okay, so I see those as different. I see different pieces of those. So there's hypnotherapy, there's mesmerism, there's energy healing, there's that energetic vampirism that can be intentional or unintentional. And they kind of seem to have grouped them together. What they said, it's Elmar. Hello. Hey, I just started. So what they said about hypnotism, they differed between mesmerism and hypnotism. They said mesmerism was, what's the right word for it? It's in this article I sent to all of you, was material, on the material plane. And it was like the ether, but more, okay? And then hypnotism, the power of hypnotism was, I think they said biological. And since I'm not, you know, my skill is in the hypnotherapy of today, not in their definitions. That's why I sent you that article. But they differed it that way. And the difference between mesmerism and hypnotism was hypnosis is like a guided imagery kind of thing, and mesmerism uses a focal point. So they said mesmerism was about the focal point and engaging the eyes and this link energetically by the eyes. And mesmerism did use a focal point, but so did hypnotism sometimes, where and it still can, where you have someone gaze at an object to have your eyes relax. Dr. Mesmer was a guy back in whenever, 1800s, who did, like, we've seen the movies where it's like, looking at me, it's like, and people would be mesmerized and enchanted. They used those words. So it was a different thing. And then with that engagement, they, in the Theosophy's discussion on it, there was this exchange or union of the energy between the mesmerizer and the subject. And that the mesmerizer could push their energy and intentions possibly, or suggestions, without voice into the person. They also brought up the use of it in black magic or white magic. So they said you have to be very careful with it. Then the same thing with hypnotism, that putting suggestion in there has to be very careful, that you can help someone, but you have to watch out about raising these energies too much. And so this was all really outside of my venue as a modern day hypnotherapist, right? And so when I was in reading through, they did talk about the benefits, that it can be used for good, and unless someone's using it for good, then they're going to get bitten for it in some future time, right? There's a little karma there, that to use these what they call powers, and I don't see myself as having power, but I can see how that can go, because it is used in a powerful way sometimes. In common everyday, like political speeches, the hypnotic voice is used. And if with repeated exposure and repeated effort, it can be used toward brainwashing or toward putting suggestion because, and I'm about to get to how it works, because of how it works. So there's a little bit of a difference between mesmerism and I did email all of you an article by Judge, and where he says Mr. Sinnott's wrong, he's mistaken, and I'm right. So this is kind of interesting. Once the all starts to break into little pieces, everybody has their own opinion and they start to call each other wrong. So, so the way hypnosis works and meditation. So there's, I think, therefore I am. I have a second handout that I did not throw in here, which is frustrating because I have another handout. I'll bring it to you next week, just to back up on this. But it was the difference between meditation and hypnosis. Okay, and I'm about to get into that, so it'll explain it anyway. So hypnosis, the way it works, and if you want to turn to the page that has the little wavy lines, you can skip over this one. Here you go.
Oh, thanks.
You're welcome. So on this page, now, most of you in here understand that we are electrical, right? That we're not just this blob, but we're a blob with electricity flowing through us. And if we didn't have that, we wouldn't move, we wouldn't think, we wouldn't anything. And our brains are electrical on how they operate and what stage they operate. So this breaks it into static, like from here to here, from here to here, from here to here. But just like the quantum field, there's a flow, it flows between those. It's like water dripping, right? It's flowing, but if you were to stop the water, you might get that, you might get that. So you can be at beta. High beta is when your brainwaves are moving the fastest. Worry, stress, paranoia, like you've been in a car accident, your plane's gonna crash. Your high-end beta, 40 hertz, is like drama, right? But then it goes all the way down to 13. And 13, these descriptions kind of isolate it to the, what's the right word? How you would classify it at its extreme level more. But low-end beta simply means you're aware and you're listening and you're operating like you're learning something new, or you're driving someplace you haven't been, or you're at work and you're doing numbers. You have to be awake and aware. You can't be too relaxed, okay? So flow down now to alpha, from beta down to alpha, you start to relax. You're doing something much more comfortable. You're, maybe walking to the library. You've just parked and you're walking, right? You're not zoned out and you're not hyper. Now flow down to theta is when you're starting to doze off. You're maybe really enthralled, somewhere like deeply enthralled with a book, or you've been reading and you start to doze off, or you're just waking up, just falling asleep. You're highly relaxed, but you're aware of what's going on. And now between theta and delta is when you actually start to fall asleep. It's just like you're asleep, but your brain's still active. Now delta, down at deep delta, you're thought free. That's your deepest. Your brain's just like how do you say the right word, pranayama, right? it's just resting. And so there's this natural flow. And the optimum state for hypnosis is theta. And what the hypnotherapist or hypnotist does is they use a variety of tools. It can use a focal point to help your eyes get tired. Your eyes send signals to your brain, so sometimes there's even like these light things that they can put on. They've been using with, sometimes I've heard about them being used for military to help get them into a state of hypnosis. Like, I want one of these. I'm just gonna like put it on one of my clients. Goes, I'll be back in 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. But it flashes lights to force your eyes to engage and put your mind in this brainwave state. And that was the mesmerism worked that way with the staring. Also, the way I use it, usually the way I was trained, and I'm a transpersonal hypnotherapist. So it's not purely clinical. It's my training was spiritual as well. So I've got the clinical basis, but we also explore past lives. We talk about spirituality. We talk about not just reaching your own subconscious, but reaching the superconscious or inspiration from the collective conscious, right? The stuff that you may not carry in locality. And I'm going to segue here that one of the things that Judge challenged Synod on in that article I sent you, I guess Synod was saying at certain stages of the mesmerism, aka hypnosis, that you could reach the spiritual realm. And that's what I would say, is that you could reach this higher level that you don't have direct access to. Now, Judge kind of said the same thing, but he said, no, your mind is never reaching that in your current state. What it's reaching is your knowledge, because there is no space and time. And it's like, okay, if there's no space and time, then you really know everything because you've been there, done that, and you're reaching your own. You're not reaching everything, but you're reaching your own knowledge because of you have opened the access to all of your lifetimes, all of your knowledge that you ever had or ever will have. And so that could explain it too, but who are we to say, right? Who are we to say where your mind's really going? We just can, say, well, this person says this, person says that, and based on the, tenets of theosophy, we can kind of talk about that later, like where's our brain really going? Now I've had one of my trainings was done on vibrational alignment, and this was more geared toward less getting into your subconscious, but going to that superconscious, that someplace else, going up and beyond for the person who says, okay, I'm not suffering with any inner stuff, I'm curious what's out there. And one of my subjects, I was like right with him because I'm very visual. He went to another planet, and I can tell when someone's actually under. They're not just but he was gone. He was like, whoa, wait, what? Like his description, he was someplace else and very creative. And I'm like, wow, that was a fun little journey. So who's to say what's truth, what's not about where your mind can go and what's real? So just throwing that in there. Now, the way I do hypnosis is usually through a gradual relaxation, sort of what you experienced when you did the writing exercise. If you get your physical body to a state of relaxation, then that part, once you've got to be at a certain level of relaxation so that you aren't focusing on, oh, my shoulder hurts, or where am I, my dress is tight. You want to be comfortable. Then I lead through, this beautiful relaxing place after the physical relaxation, and then more physical relaxation. And then there are what's called deepening techniques, where you might say, okay, now we're going to count back from 100, like they do when you go in for the surgery, right? They're hoping that's when you stop talking, they know you're gone, right? Or you go down a beautiful staircase, and it leads to a lovely garden. And once you get to that lovely garden, you're even more deeply relaxed. And so they're the process of taking someone into that state where you lead them. If somebody came into my office and they're at beta, it's going to be a long process, right? And they just had 3 cups of coffee, right? Usually, you want to, hopefully they're at least an alpha when they come in. So the more relaxed the person is, the easier the process to bring them to that state of theta where, and you can, as a therapist, I can see, when someone's laying there with their eyes closed, certain triggers, certain things as to what their eye movement is doing, what if they swallow. You can tell from visually the relaxed body that's in that theta state, things that happen. So then I know it's time to go into the suggestion. And in the theta state, like I said, your body's relaxed, your thinking is relaxed, and it basically allows your conscious thinking, busy mind, their monkeys get to go play in the trees while you're relaxing and open your subconscious, and even at maybe the deep theta level into high delta, open your superconscious. Even then, maybe you can even move that subconscious mind away to where you are not in your own mind as we know it, right? Whether you're accessing your own superconscious or you're accessing spiritual or collective consciousness, that's up for debate. And so getting that mind to relax, if you get rid of that conscious mind, then, and we've had this happen, like you wake up and you have an idea or you just remember something. So it's that state where it's a state of just waking up and being able to remember your dreams. And then as soon as like you open your eyes and start to move, you're like, oh, wait, I dreamt. I had this dream. Oh, wait, but it's gone. And then sometimes when you get back into that state, as you start to fall asleep, or you see something, and it's like, wait a minute, I had that was in my dream. Oh, my dream just came back. Because you've gotten back to that level of consciousness that allows you that access to where it was set aside. So the good thing about this is that things, as a therapeutic element, that getting into the subconscious is where you need to go to really access the root of so many problems, most real deep problems, most fears, phobias, ongoing issues. If you don't get to the source, and the source is usually in the subconscious, and as my beliefs too is that it can be in a past life, it can be an earlier lifetime, in your own lifetime. So the benefit is being able to say, get in that state and let's go back to the source of this. Because everyone knows, we all know subconsciously where it is, what it is. You can say, let's go back to the first time. And that's where stuff comes up. And so children, for example, they up until around the age of 5, 6, 7, children's brain waves are constantly in this theta kind of state. Then they slowly move up as they grow up. And that's why kids remember things like past lives, the stories about children remembering past lives when they're young, and then they forget about it. And so these stories, if you go Google children remembering past lives, you'll find these children and they have specifics. Oh, I was, an old man, I had a car accident, I owned a bank and I lived there. And they found it, it's been documented. I guess the doctor's name is it Stevenson? Stevenson, when that was brought up, that he's documented so many. So there's, evidence to this, not just like, oh, this kid said, yeah. But also trauma that comes in before those ages usually is locked in. And it doesn't have to be like, hit by a car trauma. It can be simply not being, hugged enough, or not having enough food, or something that goes on for enough time to root itself and create a further problem. So especially things that happen before the age of 7, get stuck in there, and then it gets carried on for the rest of your life, and you carry on, and you don't know why sometimes. Like somebody thinks of themselves as fat because their mother called them fat. You know what I mean? Or like they were, little things like this, or they don't feel loved because they were ignored, or whatever it is, sometimes it comes way back to there. And your subconscious, and they've done these things where they hook people up, so they know that when their brain activity has made a decision. People, I forgot how many seconds it is, but several seconds, like if you said, okay, choose the green or the red, and somebody's like, okay, I choose the red. Several seconds before they choose the red, they have shown the activity that the choice was made, but the person doesn't know. So it was like the subconscious mind chose it, and then they consciously think they chose it. So what we consciously think we're doing, we don't know we're really, our subconscious is telling us to do it. It's so life choices, partner choices, it's the reason that people kind of repeat the same thing over and over again, get stuck in the same job or the same relationship or whatever it can be. We repeat these negative patterns sometimes. So that's the benefit of hypnotherapy, and that's how it kind of works to get in there. And I was going to do a little demonstration. We'll see how that goes. And this is not a hypnosis. This is simply the power of suggestion in your mind. So if you all just kind of get comfortable, you want to go along with it. And just shake your hands out. Shake, 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 shake. And now put them out in front of you at an equal distance, right? And just take a deep breath and let it out. Good. And now close your eyes. And just close your eyes with your hands out in front of you, though. Keeping your hands out in front of you. Close your eyes. And now wiggle your left hand. Okay, now wiggle your right hand. Good. Now wiggle your wrong hand. Just kidding. Okay. So in your left hand, I want you to imagine you're holding what's tied around your wrist, actually. It's tied around your wrist are a whole bunch of helium balloons. And someone's tying more and more helium balloons to that hand. That's right, more and more helium balloons, and your hand is feeling weightless. Oh, it feels like you don't even have to hold it up. It's so light, those helium balloons are around your wrist, and someone's just tied 2 more helium balloons. 2 more. Oh, here comes someone with a really, really big helium balloon tied to your wrist. That left hand has 50 helium balloons tied to your wrist. Now, while those helium balloons are tied to your left hand, in your right hand, someone has placed a big rock. A really big rock is in your right hand. And you're holding that big rock, and they've just added another rock and another rock. Your right hand is full of rocks. It's heavy. It's so heavy you're struggling to hold that hand up. Really heavy. While at the other time, the left hand is being lifted and lifted. More helium balloons just got added. And your right hand, oh no, here comes somebody and they're adding 1 more rock to your right hand. Your right hand is heavy, really heavy. Okay, let's go ahead and stop and just look at your hands where they are and see how susceptible you were to the suggestion. Now you two, your helium and your rocks were about equal. Susanna, you went up and down. So even, the idea of you think you're holding your hands at the same.
But I made a very conscious effort to keep like I was feeling that they're going this way, and I'm like, I gotta keep
she's trying to trick me.
So that's why they were not further.
So that's just the power of suggestion. And if you can imagine if you were actually under hypnosis, in a state of hypnosis, and that the power of suggestion, especially in a beneficial way, to help you choose, what you want to be different, choose to have a different behavior. So that's just the power of the mind. And so I'm going to open it up to questions now and discussion. Questions.
Well, the first question is in reference to Vlatka. So there are people who are open to hypnosis and they are willing to let go. And then there are people who maybe not even consciously, like in this case, Vlatka thought it consciously, but then there are people who fight it subconsciously.
Right.
And they cannot let go, right?
But I didn't find this, I didn't find the suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
I was not like, I don't want rocks or I don't want helium. It was like, this is very much lighter, this is very much heavier, but I still have to keep them at the same, I was not fighting the suggestion.
Okay.
Right.
I don't know what I was fighting, if anything.
Well, just, probably, thinking, well, I know what's supposed to happen, so I'm going to try to hold my hand still and see if it still works, right? But to your question about, a lot of people ask, can everyone be hypnotized? And yes, everyone, certain people with really low IQ that cannot focus, because hypnosis requires focused listening. It's a high focus, but relaxation. So if someone's not able to focus, they can't be hypnotized. But in general, everyone can be, but they have to want to be in general. Unless, again, like I said, if it's like some sort of, what do you call it? Like Chinese water torture, where someone is either isolated and it's, the power of suggestion over and over again, just like little children, for example, because they're in that theta state. And that's why they're almost hypnotized to believe things that happen to them in this lower state. So if you're 7 and your mom's like, you're so stupid, you're no good for anything, get away from me. And this is what you get from your mother, and you're in this theta state, it takes root. So that same thing can happen in, say, a situation where someone's isolated. You hear about, like, sometimes an abusive spouse will isolate the wife from friends or cults, and they tell you over and over again, and they use this, almost a technique like this, but it's brainwashing. It's not hypnotherapy. It's not even hypnosis, but the same elements can get someone in this, create the same activity. So also, though, I have an interesting story about, I had a guy bring me his mother who had really accelerated dementia, and he would have to walk her in the door, and he was hoping that maybe hypnosis might help her retrieve memories or help in that way, and maybe help her mind. And I was like, well, let's give it a try. I don't know, never tried. And she was even like fight with him on the way in the door, hardly talk. And I thought, well, she didn't want him in the room. I think he was quite the caretaker, you know what I mean? Because she was a handful. She should have been in, someplace else for help. But when I take her in the room, and she would go down in hypnosis, like she'd be very agitated, but then she would go down. And the most amazing thing is that she hardly communicated. But under hypnosis, I said, let's go back to the age of 3, at one time. And what are you wearing? She spoke clearly. She described everything going on. She's in a dress. Her mother's in the yard. She starts to wandering down the path. She got in trouble because her mother told her not to leave the house. Very clear, and then when she came back out, she was just back to her current mental state. And I just thought that was fascinating. And I would, people say, oh, once you've got dementia, that you've lost it. But this woman had lost it in her conscious mind, but not in her subconscious mind. And if I was rich, I'd have some sort of a study and see if there wasn't something that could be done, further for patients like that. Anyway, so I thought that was fascinating. Anyway, I digress, but it was on the topic, I think. Other questions?
Well, I'm interested in these mental states and going to the negative effects of mobile phone and technology and screens on kids. And just recently heard something about that, kids going seizures and stuff. So where does that fit in with the frequencies and stuff, with the hypnosis and all these sort of things? Where there's some sort of brainwaves there which are activated and.
I would say, I haven't studied that, but I would say that's probably similar to the idea of mesmerism, in that staring at this brain screen is hypnotic, right? It's like, and I think that's probably why we get so stuck scrolling through Facebook, right? It's like, oh, and the other thing in behavioral psychology is there's the reward system. And so this is not about hypnosis necessarily, but that those things that they give you a reward system, so it keeps you coming back. You get a new picture. It's like the stimulation.
Well, I know for myself, I started graphic design when I was 30, and would mostly do the homework and stuff late at night, or I come home at like 8, being tired. I got a computer, and I was just, it's like stimulation, and I would work till 3 in the morning after being really tired. You know, it's kind of like, it's just dusted, and there's no reward.
But I think
the reward was like the screen, you know, the flickering or something.
I think
it's
the
just
lights,
like I was getting into it.
the lights, also the light coming into your optic nerve triggers awake stuff. That's why they say don't go on your computer for like an hour before bed. Also, I met a guy, this is again a little off the topic, but I met a guy who talked about you can buy these glasses, tinted lenses. So if you're using your computer at bedtime, you wear these tinted lenses, and it negates that light that keeps you awake. And
that's a good idea.
I probably can Google it.
I'll verify what you said, and I think it ties to something I read briefly in your handout, that there's this idea of kind of self-hypnosis when you get lost in a TV program or a book.
Right.
For me, what's similar to your example is when I'm working on like a website, I can sit there, and it's disorienting. I don't know that I like it, but I can sit there for hours working and be so focused, and then when it's time for me to go to bed or do something else, it's disorienting because I've lost complete sense of time, of what's going on around me, and I've in a way put myself into that state.
Right.
So you mentioned that there are times when we actually go into this naturally.
Right.
But the computer, I don't know, like that's an interesting twist, because there's just something about that
I think, it's a combination, I think, of the light and the process of what you're doing. So
Possible.
if you were working on homework and you got engaged, same sort of thing.
there's something about that screen. I do think there's something
There's,
there.
you brought up self-hypnosis, and so a lot of people say all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. A lot of hypnotherapists say that. And indeed, the reason you would say all hypnosis is self-hypnosis is because in modern day hypnosis and hypnotherapy, the subject is willing, wants to be hypnotized, right? And so I'm just a facilitator to help you get to that state. So everyone can do self-hypnosis as well, simply mimicking the the process in their mind. Like I'm feeling my facial muscles relax, or we're listening to the music that helps entrain your brain. And I kind of brought that up last time too, that music, lights, there are things that can match these frequencies, and you can entrain with them, and that means match. Your brain will start to match. Like dancing is one of those things, right? If everybody's dancing to the music, and your body wants to move to the same rhythm. So our bodies are like that. They want to match what's happening, and the frequency-wise. Same thing, you walk in a room, here's where we can get into that mesmerism, or what they kind of tied to, they didn't use this word, but there's that vampirism, energetic vampirism.
I have to share this experience I had, maybe along these lines. Pyramid scheme.
Oh.
And I was only like, I don't know, I was like 18, 19 or something. And a friend of mine got sucked into it, And I think everyone knows this pyramid scheme.
Yeah.
And I kind of like knew about a pyramid scheme and the whole thing, that there is no real winner. It's only like the top sort of thing. It's kind of like intellectually know about it, And he says like, oh no, just come along to the meeting. It's like that. And you go in there and you sort of know, I'm not going to sign up, like that. And there was sort of like, they created a sort of like a group vibration, sort of like. And I think it got in touch with a natural, maybe, I was just saying like everybody has I had this natural greed sort of thing, that maybe there's sort of things like, oh, well, you can win or something, or something. There's something that exists which I think in daily life I don't have at all, I think.
Yeah.
But it just exists something, and it sort of like got the crowd
Right.
Vibrating. I felt some sort of like euphoria or something, you know,
Mhm.
and punk, I signed up.
There
know?
you were.
And it was, I was going for about 1 hour to 2 hours afterwards, after I left the meeting. It was still there, and then I was like, what have I done, you know?
Right.
And I knew it.
Then you
know?
come down.
I knew it intellectually. You come down.
Buyer's
from it.
remorse.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
And since then, I take that very seriously. This type of group vibration is a euphoria to not listen to it even, you know,
Yeah.
because this power of suggestion was something. There was something going
Well,
on.
they were definitely
Really
using the
trained.
power of suggestion.
They were trained,
Yeah.
like,
Oh, yes.
you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so.
And in your handout,
May I speak?
yeah. Actually, I would just want to say one thing. In your handout, at the back of the section about what is hypnosis, that last page of write-up is what is NLP. That's neuro-linguistic programming. And it is part of it is the power of using suggestion, the right words, and salesmen
Yeah.
use it. As a hypnotherapist,
Oh,
I would use it during hypnosis.
Yeah.
Use these tips and these ways to get the suggestion to stick, to get the person to say, yes, this is what I want, you know.
So where's the line, the legal line sort of thing? How
them?
legally can you like use it as a salesperson or marketing?
Oh, yeah,
or
because
something
it's simply
like,
how you say
where-
something.
But where is
Yeah.
the, you know what, in some
Yeah.
ways, I think there was some draw line somewhere with I don't know, was it really true or not, but you know how they had in the movies, they said that in the movies like
Oh, that's
a
subliminal.
frame, but you know, kind of like,
Mhm. Now, if you could hear every word he said and you still signed up, then it's on you, right? Yeah. Okay, Bill?
I see some distinction in Elmar's experience, which is, I think, how most people see hypnosis, maybe from
Mhm.
movies,
Right.
that it leaves people open to suggestion. Whereas in what Rosie described, the ultimate creative state, which you have said may be an aspect of self-hypnosis,
Right.
there's a parallel in that with the work of Abraham Maslow,
Mm.
the psychologist. He focused on what he considered super mentally healthy people. And according to his hierarchy, the creative state that Rosie just described is the highest possible state of being and self-fulfillment. So I just wanted to know that parallel.
Yeah.
And the distinction between that creative state and what Elmar described as being open to others' suggestions.
Right.
I'm not sure if I was so open actually, you know? I was not open to it.
Oh, you
But
bought
I
it.
think it was, sorry?
You bought the stuff, though.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, I'm
You didn't intend to be open.
No, I've been overridden.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference between being
Yeah.
open and it's kind of like, it was not just one-on-ones,
Right.
it was actually a crowd
Yeah.
which did that, you know? And I was sort of like they say, like this mob mentality maybe. It was something like that almost.
Yeah, and that's
what I
think that's where in the theosophy discussion on it, it kind of makes that distinction between the hypnosis and mesmerism. And the mesmerism was about this like unseen energetic force that goes between the subject and the mesmerizer. And in that case, I would say like a salesman can be the mesmerizer. And with his intention, with the way he words things, that he is sending an intention that this person wants to buy this car, and you can buy into that, especially if there's a lot of people around
Which
you
was
doing
amplified.
this, but you're amplifying that feeling that this is great. Whereas, and it could be used for good, and it could be used for not good. And I think that's where theosophy kind of went, saying, well, watch out about that it could, that in times past and times current, I suppose, that it could be used, that sort of mesmerism, that sort of energetic access to someone, if that person's especially if that person's open, could be used for selfish gains or for not nice things, right? But it can be used for good stuff too.
I have a question, like, separate about hypnosis, but slightly different than this. So,
Sure.
So when you do one-on-one hypnosis, and let's say a person you're working with is able to access their subconscious and find the root of the problem, whatever it is, right? So they come back to the conscious state, right? You gave the example with the lady with dementia who didn't retain that knowledge. Is it the norm? Is it normal? Is it in general how it happens that, you know, if a person without dementia comes, like, they would be able to remember that and they would be, okay, now I see where the root of the problem is, or they just go back to their conscious state and this is once again forgotten, locked somewhere, right?
Yeah.
What was the
Well,
experience?
with
I don't
that,
know
with
because
that
of
lady
her
in
name.
particular, I can't say that she forgot it. I think she likely could remember it, but when she was awake again, the state of her ability, that conscious current ability, it's, for example, I haven't tried this on anyone, I should try it on myself, but for example, they say that hypnosis can alleviate allergies, right? And you think of that as a physical thing, but, and that's why I say I would love to be able to experiment more, but it was like the conscious door closed on her access to express. So she wasn't able to express anymore. I can't, once she was awake, I don't know that she could remember it because she could not express in words anymore. She was, incoherent again. Does that make sense?
Right, but
But
what
it
if
was-
it's like people who
Yeah,
don't
with
have
a normal
dementia,
person.
yeah.
So, for example, say if somebody, usually they'll remember it. And as a hypnotherapist, I can say, and now you're going to remember everything that you experienced, and that memory's coming back with you as you wake up, right? And, but there is the option for the person, and this is something you would agree upon beforehand with the subject, that if something really heavy duty comes up, like rape or molestation as a child or something that they didn't remember, if something like that comes up beforehand, I can say, would you like to remember this later? And what I would say is, you can choose to bring this memory back now or later. You can choose to have this memory come back when you're ready for it. And it's like crazy because a person, might wake up and then sometime later when they're, as they're building their emotional strength, then they will on their own think they remembered it. And so I generally would leave something like that. Like, you can choose, you know best when you can choose this memory to come back. And then give the suggestion for, just living happily without it. So, but usually because sometimes it can be very, something that the person can't deal with remembering right now because they have a great relationship with the father that raped them when they were 5, right? What would you do with that? Right? So sometimes it's not for their best benefit to remember. Yeah. But you can still deal with it in hypnosis. And there's several ways. Like some of the ways are just shrinking it down, like using some of these NLP techniques, picturing it as something that just it's not in your life anymore, it's no longer a part of your life. There's just different techniques. Or also forgiveness in the way of understanding that person did not have the capabilities to be a better person at that time, that they did, not that they didn't know better, but that's just their toolbox, and that's what that person was, and it's not about you, and you can let that go now because it doesn't, no longer affects you.
Erasing memory or something?
No, but saying that what happened, while under, you can say, this is not your life now, this no longer affects you, this is past now, and you picture it just disappearing into the past. It's a memory, but it no longer carries any power over you. And there's different, all sorts of different ways, and obviously like in an hour-long or 45-minute long session, there would be all sorts of stuff like that going on.
I remember there was a movie, it's called Entire Sunshine of a Blissful Mind or something. And that's with Jim Carrey, and they was dealing with erasing a memory, like a traumatic
the something mind,
with Kate Winslet and
that was a long title movie. That's my daughter's favorite.
I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
Sorry, Omar.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I don't like crowds, by the way. I don't know why, but probably.
Now you know
because of
why,
this.
right? Yeah.
Like, yeah, this is enough for me. But my follow-up question about this, so, have you done past life
Mhm.
hypnosis, and
Yeah.
how does it work? How does it?
I haven't done it for trauma. I've done it for more interest. Someone was just interested, and so I've done a few of them. And basically, it's the same process as the hypnosis. But when we go back on time, for example, if somebody wants to go back to the source of the problem or back to childhood or whatever. So the process is that I use. Maybe other people use different stuff. But imagine once you're under hypnosis, and say, now imagine there's this line above your head. And it goes all the way forward as far as you can see, and all the way back in time as far as you can see. And you're just going to float up to that, and you can see yourself, and you've floated up there. And now go back on this timeline to, like either the source, or go back to 15 years old. Go back to, and like if I say go back to the source, they may immediately skip back to a past life someplace, right? Or I can say just go back in time, you're 1 year old, you're 5 months old, now you've just been born, and now going back and through, in between the stage of living and being born. And so you take them back like that, and you can go back like that. More generally, I might say go back to a previous life, and just even say go back to a life before now that has a message for you in your current life, or that has something to do with any issues you're having now. Go back, and in that case, they might go back to a past life with someone. They talk about soul groups that we have, like within this one, that there are these little pods of souls that kind of like hang around together. And so go back to a time when you knew this person before. And I found that really beneficial for myself when I used that, because like if you're having an issue with somebody that you're intimately involved with, child, parent, spouse, go back to when you knew them before and what's happening. And it turns out you see a lot of times the relationship, even if they're a different person, like maybe they were a child, now they're a father or whatever, even if they were a different person, the dynamic of the relationship remains the same, and it can give you answers as to that's this dynamic playing out again. And just the awareness helps that, that's the dynamic between this soul and I. And if there's something to heal about it, or for me to learn from this, now I can understand this is a repeating pattern. So we get into the patterns and the repeating, from one life to the next. You can repeat the patterns within your own life and with others in your life. So that's it. It's kind of go back on a timeline.
Have you had people remember what happens between lives?
Yes, and there's actually
what do they say about that?
well, there's a hypnotic.
It's not confidential.
There's a hypnotic therapy called Life Between Lives.
Yeah, Michael Newton, right? That too, right?
Yeah, he created
Michael
it.
Newton, he created it.
Yeah, he did. And actually, he was one of the speakers early on at the group that taught me. So my teachers learned from him. And so they have a process called Life Between Lives. And what you do there is you go back. Like I was describing, you go back, now you're going back, you're 6 months, and you're back, and you go through the birth process, and kind of reversing the birth, and now you've gone through, but you're the baby, you're the little spirit, so you're imagining going back into like that unknown area, you hear your mother's heartbeat, and that sort of thing, and then where were you before there, right? And so usually, interestingly enough, the overlying story is that they have spirit guides, and that there's somebody there that meets them, and they discuss like, what did we just do? What are we going to do next? What do I need to learn? And so people's experience in that process, it does match what some of the topics are, that you plan what you need to learn in your next life. What does my soul need to come out of here with? And people can choose, the soul can choose a life of hardship based on their soul's goal to advance. So, or they're like, yeah, last life was tough. I think I'm going to go like be a princess now. But supposedly they review. There's a life review of what you did, how your behavior in your corporeal body, right? How you were as a human, and how that reflects your soul, and what your soul still needs to to gather in the next lifetime. So that's what I've heard, but I have not done a life between lives with somebody.
And he
Right.
has written several books. I
Yeah.
read all of them. Yeah, they're fascinating.
I have a question of, do you approach like different people differently in terms of like, for example, a person which is very interested in this like afterlife or whatever, these states, would you use different techniques compared to one who doesn't believe anything sort of thing, or is very, rigid in some thinking?
Yeah.
You have a different approach to it?
Exactly. So if there's somebody who is either very religious or not religious at
Yeah.
all, and I like to get that beforehand, so that when I'm using terminology, I use the
Oh, yeah.
terminology that they're acceptable.
Right.
And so if it's someone very scientific and they don't want to talk about the higher light from the universe or the higher power, it's more based on, now you're going to use your will to induce yourself
Oh, yeah.
to feel fully relaxed, and you are completely in control of this process, as opposed to, what I'm saying? So that's someone who has to be in control. And you do get the people who are like very analytical, and then you have to say, don't worry right now about the answer. The answer, you can ask all the questions after we're done. Right now,
It must be quite difficult because naturally you have certain terminology.
yeah.
To kind of switch to something like would be quite difficult.
Yeah.
So do people, if they're in this state, theta state, do they remember, or do you have to tell them? Or is it,
Yeah, it's sort of like that dream state, right? So theta is that sort of just waking up and you remember your dream, so that's the state they're in while they're under.
You said that
So
already.
I often have to, I direct them, you're going to remember everything, you're going to bring this back. I keep notes, a lot of times I record the session if they like, and then I do tell them, because I've had the sessions done for myself, and then I might remember it right away, and then a few days later, I'm like, oh wait, I forgot exactly what. So the notes that are written up or the recording is good to have, because
Okay.
it does fade.
Yeah.
So it's basically.
It fades way back
When you
in.
yourself are in that state, it's
Mhm.
like you were in a dream. And
It's
it
not- yeah.
feels like.
It feels more real. So that's the
That's
different,
what I thought.
that's a different sensation,
Okay.
especially past lives. It doesn't feel like a dream, it feels like you're there, you feel the emotions, not necessarily a pain, or like some people do. Will feel the physical pain, or some people, like, not in my group, but I've heard, maybe if they choke to death, they start choking or coughing, that they can go through these symptoms. In my cases, I experienced, the grief, or I start crying, at something horrible that happened in my past life, and I've seen it and I feel it. Much different than it's like a very, very intense dream, I guess I would say, where sometimes you wake up and you're like, oh, what did I just dream? That was horrible, but you're in it, you're not the viewer necessarily. And sometimes you can be the viewer, sometimes you can be in it, you can be seen through your eyes, or you can be seen as the viewer.
Is there like, is it good to kind of say like, well, you have a hypnotherapist in conjunction with psychoanalyst or something? Is this sort of like you have a team and it's like, I want to tackle something and I'm kind of like get a team?
Yes, a lot of times the psychologist or psychiatrist will refer to a hypnotherapist. So,
Okay.
because if they don't do hypnotherapy themselves,
right,
and
yeah.
the talk therapy can only go so far, because they might not be able to
How
reach
would-
what the real problem is.
So would they kind of say like, oh, I refer the case, or you work together in some ways?
Well, it would be one at a time, somebody might send me somebody and say, here's the presenting issue, and if we have permission to talk to each other. Or
Okay.
sometimes people go to one and then another, and then they might come to me, or after they've been to a psychologist,
And
and
is there
they do their
communication
own.
between the
Only if they
group?
want there to be
Ah.
communication. So there are some groups that work together, but I have had people who went to a psychologist and then also came to me, they were doing their own,
Yeah.
their own mishmash.
Yeah.
One last thing on the meditation, about the difference, and I'll bring that handout next week. The difference between meditation and hypnosis is nothing as far as the brainwave state. Both take you to the same brainwave state between theta and down into delta. Deep, deep meditation, the goal is to go into that thoughtlessness, the empty mind of the deep delta. Okay, hypnosis keeps you pretty much in the deep theta, high delta. So that's a little bit of a difference. But when you're meditating and you're still aware of your surroundings, what's going on, you take yourself down these same states. Hypnosis usually, or hypnotherapy, is usually geared toward giving a suggestion because the person wants something to change, they want help. So you're giving suggestion. Meditation is usually simply geared toward, focusing on an object or kind of emptying your mind and not suggesting or not, so that's the difference.
Have you ever worked with an individual where the subconscious isn't a very big factor in their life? So, maybe you begin talking to this person's subconscious, and it's so identical to their normal state that there's no difference?
No, because usually the people that I've worked with, they weren't aware, they come because they have a problem, and then we do find like some sort of a root, or where they didn't realize that something that happened in 7th grade was still affecting them.
Okay.
And so usually people don't just say, I just want to be hypnotized, but usually, for everybody, we've got subconscious stuff going on, we just don't know. Yeah, okay. Did you have any questions before I feel like you didn't get to ask anything. You're welcome, Bill.
How do
I don't think so.
Would you say that since you're facilitating and you're like observing, do you stay out of the experience?
Yeah, it's sometimes it's hard to stay out of the experience if someone's really getting descriptive. Like when that guy went to a couple planets, I was like, wow. Now what do you see?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, it was fascinating. And that's what I did not quite get onto, but the idea that we can reach that higher, different level too. We can go out of our realm. But yeah, I stay out of it because I'm they're leading, I'm driving the car for the person while they're relaxing. So I can't just be like, okay, wow, then we both be gone.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Good to have you back.
I'm glad to be back, and I think what a ferocious responsibility you have,
Oh,
because you can influence people,
hopefully in a
and
good
you
way.
have to be careful not to.
Well, only when they're under hypnosis. In general,
Yeah.
I don't feel terribly influential in my everyday life.
You have to be aware of their integrity as they are, and you're helping them. And I should think that this may happen with people with sincere religious desire to help, but not a lot of self-awareness, that they begin to get a grip on people, and then they can persuade those people to do things.
Yeah. And that's what
Terrible
Theosophy
responsibility.
well, that's what Theosophy was warning against.
Yes.
Was, watch out, you don't want to use it for your own gain or for
Are
what
you,
you
are
think.
you, are you yourself pure enough to do this?
And that actually is one of the processes that, because of my training in the transpersonal, is they talk about clearing yourself before you go into that.
That's so important.
And it's about them, it's not about me.
Because
Yeah.
you see these people who,
Yeah.
as young men and women, are earnest to help, and then they do most dreadful things.
Because because they're helping based on their decision of what they think is best.
Right.
Yeah,
But
and that's,
But that could happen
Mhm.
also with a regular therapist. I
Oh,
once did
yes.
a
No
session
kidding.
at the Jung Society
Yeah.
where the director talked about it and said, in the end, every therapist should first go to therapy, him or
Oh, yeah.
herself,
Oh,
to
yeah.
clear out, because they might, treat people based on their personal experiences and not me.
And it is-
So it doesn't matter if it's hypnotherapy or therapy or
Yeah.
any kind of help.
Yeah.
We have to make sure
Oh, that's right.
that, to have this
Yeah.
work.
One of my benefits, I think, that helps me a lot with doing sort of therapeutic stuff is like right out of college, I was trained as a facilitator for groups. And it was all about like no judgment. It's like just open, and I learned to let go of like, well, I don't think that's right, or I think that's wrong, or I think it's like, well, that's interesting.
Yep.
You're different, that's, and I may have my personal judgments, but when I'm in my space, it's not about what I think is right or wrong, or good or bad.
But
you know?
just, yeah, but even
Yeah.
in the literature.
But still, subconsciously, I probably have stuff going on that I have to keep in
Maybe
rein.
not, because I remember when we have book discussions, when you discuss a book and you're the facilitator and there are 10
Oh,
different things, you know, you learn to say, interesting, you know, what they got out of the book or whatever,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
you'll get these 10 different opinions, and if you're not judgmental, just say,
Yeah.
I don't get it, just say, this is fascinating.
Mhm.
I think that's the approach you have, interesting, as you said.
Yeah.
You have that distance.
Yes, I create
Yeah.
that space.
Yeah.
So although I'm engaged with my client, I'm not engaged with the onus of it has to be my way.
Your
Exactly.
point
It's
of
not
view.
about me, it's about like to their health and benefit.
Yes, it's so
And not the way I
fascinating.
think that has to happen for them, but what they come to me for, yeah.
But it's the law, this
I
is the
thank
law in
you.
nature.
Oh,
And
thank
I
you.
think people who get you as a therapist are lucky.
Thank you, yes, I'll put that on my YouTube, right?
Thank you so much, Desiree.
Thanks, everybody, I enjoyed
Yeah.
telling you about it.
Good to have you back.
I'm glad to be back.